his book, 6 Hours, One Friday, Max Lucado writes of an experience that paints the picture of loneliness in indelible terms. He said, "I had driven by the place countless times. Daily I passed the small plot of land on the way to my office, and daily I told myself, someday I need to stop there. Today that someday came. I convinced a tight-fisted schedule to give me another 30 minutes, and I drove in. Now, the intersection appears no different from any other in San Antonio. There was a Burger King, a roadway inn, a restaurant, but turn northwest and go under the cast iron sign, and you will find yourself on an island of history that is holding its own against the river of progress. The name of the sign, Lock Hill Cemetery. As I parked," said Lucado, "a darkened sky threatened rain. A lonely path invited me to walk through the 200-plus tombstones in the cemetery. The fatherly oak trees arched above me, providing a ceiling for the solemn chambers. Tall grass, still wet from the morning dew, brushed my ankles. The tombstones, though weathered and chipped, were alive with yesterday. Ruth Lacey's buried there. Born in the days of Napoleon in 1807, died over a century ago, 1877. I stood on the same spot where a mother wept on a cold day some 8 decades ago. The tombstone read simply, Baby Bolte, born and died December 10th, 1910. 18-year-old Harry Ferguson was laid to rest in 1883 under these words, Sleep sweetly, tired young pilgrim. I wondered what had worried him so at such a young age. And then I saw it. I saw what was chiseled into a tombstone on the northern end of the cemetery. The stone marks the destination of the body of Grace Llewellyn Smith. No date of birth is listed, no date of death. Just the names of her 2 husbands and this epitaph. Sleeps but rests not, loved but was loved not, tried to please but pleased not, died as she lived, alone. Words of futility. Max Lucado said, I stared at the marker and wondered about Grace Llewellyn Smith. I wondered about her life. I wondered if she'd written the words or just lived them. I wondered if she deserved the pain. I wondered if she was bitter or beaten. I wondered if she was plain. I wondered if she was beautiful. I wondered why some lives are so fruitful and some are so futile. I caught myself wondering out loud, Mrs. Smith, what broke your heart? Raindrops smudged my ink as I copied the words, loved but loved not. And I thought of empty beds and silence and no response to messages left and no return to letters that were written, no love exchanged for love given, died as she lived, alone. And I wondered how many Grace Llewellyn Smiths there are. How many people will die in the loneliness in which they are living? The homeless in Atlanta, the happy hour hopper in Los Angeles, the bag lady in Miami, the preacher in Nashville, or any person who doubts whether the world needs him, any person who is convinced that no one really cares, any person who had been given a ring but never given a heart, who had been given criticism but never given a chance, who had a bed but never had any rest. These are the victims of futility. And unless someone intervenes and unless something happens, the epitaph of Grace Smith will be theirs as well. Died as she lived, alone. In his book, The Devil's Advocate, Morris Smith tells us that we need to understand that loneliness is no new thing. It comes to all of us sooner or later. Friends die, families move, lovers and husbands die. We get old, we get sick. In a society where people live in impersonal cities and suburbs and where electronic entertainment often replaces personal relationships, where people move from job to job and state to state and marriage to marriage, loneliness has become an epidemic in our society. And what is it? And how does it feel? Someone has suggested that loneliness is an empty feeling in the pit of the stomach, almost to the point of nausea. Someone else has suggested it's an underlying anxiety, a big black pit. It's a sharp ache in moments of grief or separation. It's a long period of stress that wears you down until you're discouraged and defeated. It's a longing for completeness. One author says it's always characterized by a feeling of emptiness somewhere in the region of the diaphragm. It is a craving to be filled, and at various times we seek to fill the vacuum with everything from food to alcohol to endless demands on other people, or we will try to pacify it by using drugs or just going to sleep or perhaps attempting to escape in some other way. Is there a connection between loneliness and health? That's like asking if there's a connection between breathing and life. Of course there is. And loneliness is something we all have to deal with at one time or another. There are many people who experience loneliness in our culture, and I don't have any question about the fact that there are many sitting out here in front of me today who know the pain of that and perhaps know it severely even now. There are, first of all, in the experience of loneliness, the single people in our culture. Some of you will be surprised to learn that San Diego has one of the highest single populations in the United States. And every single person knows the anguish of going home to cook a meal for one and then watching television alone at night with no one to laugh at your jokes or comment on the things that you see together. When she was single, Ann Kimmel wrote about an experience she had on a New Year's Eve when she was all alone.